In this video tutorial, I want to go over and present how to perform serial slicing by modifying the FancyWires grasshopper script. The ability to serial slice objects is fundamental to sculpture practice, and it's a good tool to use for creating both serial sliced sculptural forms and creating underlying substructures for forms that can be created with wood, with foam, and other sculptural materials. In this tutorial, once again, I'm going to go over how to use the FancyWires script to produce a serial sliced object and lay it out with numbers for laser cutting. In this first part of the tutorial, I want to go over the workflow for adding the registration cores to our model for serial slicing. The registration cores are very important because that's what we use to register our slices so that they align our model properly. There are two types of registration cores that you can use. You can either go with a square dowel rod, as I've indicated here, or you can go with a round dowel rod. The advantage of using a square dowel rod is that you only really need one dowel rod to register your slices because they can't rotate. Even so, I often like to use two because that really locks the movement of your slices. If you use a round dowel rod, you have to use two because you need to in order to keep your slices from moving and rotating. An additional advantage of using a round dowel rod is that you can use and employ all threads as you're working. Okay, but let's go over the process for creating your registration cores for your models. And I like to start by bringing up my layers menu, and I'm going to select these two cores, and I'm going to put them on a new layer using my Change Object Layers menu. And once I do that, I'm going to hide those so that those are no longer visible. And I'm going to go over the process now for creating your registration cores. The first thing that you want to do, and I'm going to use round ones in this case. You'll want to go to your solids menu, and you want to bring up your cylinder tool. The base of my cylinder is going to be here, and the diameter for 3/8 inch 3/8 inches is 0.375, and I've set that up already, and it produces that. And I'm going to come down to my front window, and I'm going to drag it out here. And I'm going to move that over to my model, and I want to make sure that it passes through my model, that it not only passes through my model, and I have to register it in two windows. Here's the bottom window, and here's the top window. I'm going to move this up over here so that it registers in two windows so it gets it to the actual location that I want it. And now what I'll do, I'll take this and I'll hold down my Shift key, and I'll use my Alt key to make a duplicate, and I'll slide one over there like so. And I'll go with the round ones because I think I'd like to use all threads to join this together. And you want to make sure when you look at it that it passes through all of the slices, or the most slices in your object. Okay, you want to make sure that it does that, and this looks pretty good. The other thing that you want to make sure that you've done before you even add the cores is dimension your model, because right here my model I have a grid that's 1 grid unit to an inch, so my model is approximately 12 inches tall by 12 inches wide. But you want to make sure that you dimension your model before you add the add the threads. That's very important. Now, it's important before you engage the grillage script that you do two things. That you boolean your cores into your model, okay, and also that you rotate your model 90 degrees so that it's aligned along the y-axis, so that your model is aligned along the y-axis, and you'll see why later when we get to our next session where we're setting it up for the grillage. Okay, so let's go now and let's perform our Boolean operation. We select this object, and let's do this. We'll take these two right there, we'll select those, and we'll actually group those together by hitting Control-G on the keyboard to group those together. So that's one object, and that's another object. So now we'll select both, and we'll do a Boolean two objects command. Okay, and let's select the two objects to Boolean. Okay, we have to do those one at a time. Select that one, and we'll select that one, and that works. The union works there. Okay, and so now that's chord. That's what we want. So we'll hit return. And now we'll right-click to execute the same command again. We'll click this one, click that one, and that's chord. Okay, and that's exactly what we want now. We can see the cores moving through our objects, and it doesn't get any better than that. Now, the last thing that we want to do as a preparation is that we want to line our object along the y-axis. And you want to make sure that it's aligned along the y-axis, and that will become very apparent when we get into Grasshopper and we add our grillage script to our object. And you'll see why that becomes important. Now, as a matter of fact, to illustrate that, I'm going to leave this right here at this point so that that becomes clear. So this completes part 2, booleaning in and adding the cores, the registration cores, to your model. Now, to add a square core to my model, I will come over to my solids menu, and I would bring up my box tool, and I'll click here to set the base, and the base length would be 0.375 because it's 3/8, and I'll do another one at 0.375, and now I'll drag this up here in the front window, and I could actually bring this right over and align that right over the center in two windows like that. And that would actually be all the cores that I really need if I'm using squares. You can get away with one. I like to use two often because it really helps to align it properly when you use two. And once again, to bring in my other core, I will hold down my Shift key so it moves perpendicular, hit my Alt key, and I'll add a copy there. And just as I did earlier with the round cores, now we do our Boolean operations. We click our core and our object. We can go up to our shelf and do a Boolean two objects. And you notice that there, my core is there. And I hit that. Now I come in, select my object, select my core, hold down the Shift key, select my object, do a Boolean two objects. And now that's set there, hit enter, and here I have two square cores. So that's how you would go about using the same setup but with square cores. You could get away with a single one to really register it. On a more complex model, you might have a series of cores that go through different sections, and but you'd follow the same procedure to add those. It's very important that those are embedded in your model before you run the FancyWires script, because that's how it sees the model. And that completes our setup.